Kia ora, good morning everyone, Richard Wong here. Today we are looking at the Laowa 17mm f1.8 lens, the one I am holding right here. This is a pretty compact lens designed for micro four third camera. It is a manual focus only lens, and the focal length, equivalent focal length is 35mm, which is my favorite focal length for doing everyday photo and also street photography as well. So before we start doing some image quality analysis and talk about build quality and things like that, I want to go out and take some photos, do a bit of street photography with this lens. So let's go and take some photos first. I mentioned that 35mm is my favorite focal length. The reason is because it's slightly wider than 50mm, so I can capture a bit of background environment when I'm taking photo, but it's not as wide as 28mm, which I personally find it a bit hard to control to get the nice composition in the photo. It's something that I'm trying, but I still feel more comfortable with the 35mm. But I know that a lot of photographers who like to shoot from the hip, they would prefer 28mm because they can just take the photo. It's quite wide, so they can always crop a little bit after you took the photo. But for myself, I prefer not to crop the photo, or at least try to minimize the cropping after I shot the photo. So I just feel more comfortable with the 35mm. One little tip for doing street photography is if you are planning to shoot black and white photo, even if you are shooting raw, I would suggest you just change the color profile to black and white even if you're shooting raw. The reason is that if you change to black and white profile, if you look at your screen or the EVF, then it will help you to visualize the photo a lot better than just leave it in the color mode. Another little tip for doing street photography is try to wear something dark color, black if possible. So that means when you are holding the camera like this in front of you, the camera will not be so obvious. So today I'm definitely doing the wrong example because it's a very cold day. So this morning when I woke up, I just grabbed my this coat, which is my warmest coat. Didn't really think about I'm going to do some street photography later today. So yeah, don't wear something like this because everyone will be looking at you and you see your camera very easily. Welcome back to my home studio, and I hope you enjoy the photos I shot on the street. After doing a bit of street photography using this Laowa lens, I found it actually a very good lens for doing street photography. First thing is, it is very compact, so when you use it on a micro four thirds camera, so you have a pretty small camera package, so when you are taking photo on the street, you don't really draw too much attention. And if you set the aperture to about f5.6, and then you just need to set the focus distance to somewhere between 1 meter and infinity. So normally I set it to something like this, and I found it is enough to cover the normal distance when you are doing street photography. So if your subject is about 1 meter or so away from you, all the way to maybe 10 or 15 meter away from you, it will still be in focus. So what it means is that when you are doing street photography, you have it set like this, and you don't have to worry about focusing, and basically you can just point and shoot. So that makes it a very good street photography lens. Before we continue the review, I want to say that I do have a affiliated link to Laowa's official web store. I put it down below. So if you are interested in buying this lens, please use my link and visit Laowa's official web store, and then you can buy this lens or any of the Laowa lens, and then I can get a little bit of commission and it wouldn't cost you any extra money. Okay, now let's continue the review and talk about the more technical stuff of this lens. First, let's talk about the build quality and the body design first. It is a very compact lens, as I've already mentioned before, and the lens is very lightweight as well. It is only 160 grams, but despite it is so light, when you hold it on the hand, it does feel very solid thanks to the metal construction. And the interesting thing is, the body of this Laowa 17mm lens appears to be identical to the Laowa 7.5mm f2 lens. I don't have the 7.5mm lens with me to do a side-by-side comparison, but from memory and also look at the spec sheet, the size of this lens seems to be completely identical to the 7.5mm. The height of the lens, the diameter of the lens, the filter thread is still the same, 46mm, and even the weight of the lens, this is 160 grams, which is very similar to the Laowa 7.5mm, which is either, from memory, is either 150 and 170, depends on which version you pick. The lens comes with a petal-shaped lens hood like this one, and it is reversible, so when you put it in your camera bag, you can take it off and then put it back like this. The lens hood also fits very nicely and very securely onto the lens. And at the top of the lens, we have the aperture ring here, and this aperture ring has clicks, and there is a click at every stop from f1.8 all the way to f22. The aperture ring feels very nice, and I really like it because that means when I'm taking photos, I don't really need to look at the lens. I can just by feeling the clicks, and I can know exactly what aperture value I'm changing to. The only minor complaint is that the aperture range, if you look at it, you can see that the travel distance between every stop is not linear. So you can see that from f1.8 to f2.8, there is quite a big travel distance, but then from that onwards, every click the distance is getting smaller and smaller. It makes it a little bit harder to control when you are getting to a small aperture value. And then below that, you have the manual focus ring. It also feels very smooth, and the travel is around 90 degrees or so, I think slightly over 90 degrees, and the friction seems to be just right, not too tight, not too loose. And because of the EVF and peaking and magnification, it is actually very easy to do a precise manual focus using this manual focus ring. Now, because the lens itself is not very big and the manual focus ring is also not very big, I think it would be great if Laowa can actually put the focus tab on the bottom of the lens, so that would allow me to change the focus a lot easier, and I can also know what focus distance I'm setting it to without having to look at the lens. A bit like the most of the Leica M lenses, they have the focus tab there, or even the Laowa 4mm fisheye lens, they also have the focus tab here. So I would really love to see the focus tab also on this tiny little 17mm lens as well.
But anyway, the overall build quality of this Laowa 17mm lens is very good. It feels very solid, feels very metal, and both the aperture ring and the manifocus ring are both very nice and smooth. Okay, next let's talk about the image quality of this lens, and let's start from the image sharpness first. The center sharpness of this lens is excellent, even at the maximum aperture. Look at the center, it is already very sharp, and if you stop down to f2.8, it doesn't actually make too much difference because at f1.8, the lens is very sharp already. Okay, now let's look at the corner. At the maximum aperture f1.8, it is slightly soft at the very corner of the frame. Stop down to f2.8 would improve the corner sharpness quite a lot. So even if you then further stop down to f4 onwards, then you won't get much improvement in the corner sharpness because at f2.8 the corner sharpness is already pretty decent. In terms of chromatic aberration, when I'm taking photo at the maximum aperture, sometimes when shooting very high contrast scene, I do see a bit of color fringing at the maximum aperture. If I stop down to f2.8, then it would improve quite a lot, and from f4 onwards, then there is virtually no chromatic aberration at all. There could be a bit of lens flare and ghosting when I'm shooting at the maximum aperture and directly into the sun or some very strong light source. So if you don't really like lens flare, then you may have to avoid shooting directly into a very strong light source, or if you stop down the lens slightly, I find it also help minimize the lens flare as well. When shooting at f1.8, I can see there's a bit of light fall off at the edge of the frame. Stop down to f2.8 would improve the light fall off quite a lot. And when I stop down to f4, then vignetting is virtually unnoticeable. When taking normal everyday photo, I don't really notice much distortion at all with this Laowa 17mm lens. But when I'm shooting my brick wall test photo or some of the photo that has a very strict line near the edge of the frame, then I do notice there is a bit of distortion. Fortunately, the distortion seems to be quite easily removed or minimized in post-processing. So look at this example photo. This is what it looks like originally, and if I load it into Lightroom and applied just a +8 distortion correction, and this is the result I got. As you can see, after applying a bit of distortion correction, then there is very minimal distortion in the final photo. When I'm shooting at the maximum aperture, the bokeh is quite round and quite smooth, and also the transition at the edge of the bokeh doesn't look nervous at all. When I stop down the lens, then the bokeh would quickly turn into heptagon shape because of its 7 curved aperture braid design. But for a lens like this 17mm f1.8 lens on a micro four thirds camera, if you want to dissolve the background, you really have to shoot at the maximum aperture f1.8, then you can dissolve the background into nice round bokeh. With the price of this lens is only $149 US, I really wasn't expecting the image quality to be fantastic. If you look at the test photo I shot, image sharpness is actually very good from center all the way to the corner. Bokeh, chromatic aberration, vignetting are both not bad. But for the distortion and lens flare, I think they both can be a little bit better. But then when I look at the photo I took when I was doing street photography and some of the everyday photo I shot over the last couple of weeks, I am actually pretty happy with the image quality. I mean, it's definitely not perfect, but I feel this is good enough for me and probably good enough for a lot of you guys as well. And because of its very compact size, I think it could be a great everyday lens for a lot of people. And I don't really say that because I want you to click on my affiliated link and buy the lens so that I can get some commission. I just came back from a trip to Queenstown. I had a holiday there with the family, and guess what? For that trip, I actually took this lens as my main lens with my G85 because I feel like this lens, because of its compact size and also the 35mm equivalent focal length, it would be a very good travel photography lens because I can use it to do a bit of portrait, I can use it to shoot landscape and pretty much everything in between. I'm still going through the photo that I shot during the trip, and once I tidy it up, then I'm going to create another video and share with you the photo I shot during that trip. So if you haven't subscribed to my channel, subscribe now and also hit the bell button next to it so that when I upload my next video with the photos from the trip shot using this lens, you won't miss it. If you have been looking at buying either the Olympus 17mm f1.8 lens or the Leica 15mm f1.7 lens, then I think this Laowa 17mm f1.8 lens would be a very affordable alternative to those two much more expensive lens. Obviously, the biggest downside with this lens is that this is a manual focus lens, but I feel with mirrorless camera, because you have all those features like EVF or peaking or magnification, manual focus is actually pretty easy with a lens like this 17mm f1.8 lens. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you found this video informative. If you have any question about this lens, please feel free to drop a comment below and I will try to answer your questions. Thank you again for watching this video and I will see you in my next video.